fire. We'll do the mime talking about. Hello. Welcome to This Podcast Is Not For You. My name is Wes.
I'm Jake.
Trying to be more authentic.
So you're Jake.
So I am today and for always and forever will always be. I'm Wes.
Oh. Yep. There Always. Real quick for those of you that are listening on your podcast platform of preference, we do have a YouTube channel.
Yes, we do.
We have video, and the videos will have exclusive content, not by design, but by editing choices. But the YouTube, we are just going to throw up completely unedited. Just whatever happens.
Whatever stupid stuff that we
Yes.
say or fail to say correctly.
That's a better point.
Yeah.
You won't hear as many as you will see in the YouTube video. A lot of those get cut out. So,
super thrilling to watch.
yes, if you're listening and you're like, man, I wish I could see these guys right now.
And see our amazing mugs. Let us know if you want to buy them.
Just real quick before we get started.
Thank you.
We keep forgetting to say something about that, but we work really hard on it. So it'd be great if you could subscribe.
There's a link.
And link it.
There's a link tree in our Instagram bio to all of our stuff, and it'll lead you to our YouTube channel so you can subscribe and like.
What grows on a link tree?
Links.
Got him.
You got me there, guys.
Easy.
Today, we are talking about the best and worst adaptations. What do we mean by adaptations? For the purposes of this...
What do you mean by
What do I mean? For the purposes of this discussion, we're talking about movies or shows that are adapted from written material. I specifically kind of want to leave out things that are historical events that are probably written about in numerous books.
Based on true story.
Yeah. The example that came to mind for me was Lincoln. Lincoln is based on a book called Team of Rivals, but it's also just the stuff that happened.
Sure.
So it is a form of adaptation, but it's less interesting than these examples that we're talking about on here.
Oh, interesting. I feel like you've got one in there that is a little questionable then. Teaser. Just move past it. Be a host.
I think I know which one you're talking about. But
Lord of the Rings.
So
Something
before
called
we get into our examples and stuff, really what I kind of want to debate with you guys is what do we feel like makes a good adaptation? And I've got a list of hypothetical questions to talk about, but let's just start with that. What do you guys feel like, just kind of base level thoughts? What makes a good adaptation?
To me, it has to be starkly different than whatever written form it's based on. Unless it is in screenplay form. If it's in novel form at all, if it's in novella form at all, I think you have to radically change it. And what I mean by that is pacing and the technical aspects of making a film are never going to line up with the technical aspects of making a novel. They never will. And the pacing's always different. The feeling's always different. I think you have to... The best examples, I think, go off book.
That is the opposite, I think, of...
Series wants to be a part of this podcast.
Did anyone say anything?
Listen
like
to your whole paragraph. That is the opposite of what I think most people would say about an adaptation. I think a lot of people would say they want it to be really faithful to whatever
I think
source material
people's
is.
initial wants and desires for something coming out, that lines up with it. I think that the longest lasting adaptations, the ones that become great pictures in movies.
I need Martin Scorsese.
Sorry,
moving pictures on a silver screen. You hear me, baby.
The
It's
pictures
a wonderful picture.
become pictures. Those are the ones that deviate. The
Yeah.
ones that last and become something different than the book are the ones that capture what the fans of the books wanted going in, but they didn't know that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think. Anyway, I was about to shout one out, but
Right.
we're gonna get to that later.
Right.
Hold on, everybody.
Jacob,
What was the question?
what makes a good adaptation in your opinion?
I'm gonna buy stuff.
I would say
This is exclusive YouTube content. Peyton
We're
is
buying-
purchasing
Stuff.
stuff.
This podcast is not for you. Items.
yes. A good adaptation.
There you have it, folks.
I think as long as the heart of the work is the same, and this is where you get sort of subjective. Obviously, I mean, the heart of the work is subjective too, I guess. But
Yeah.
the biggest plot points, the biggest character motivations, as I think those have to stay the same. Because if it is an adaptation with, a established audience, that means that the audience have gravitated towards it for some reason.
Yeah.
And I think if you change anything huge like that, then you lose kind of what it was that you were adapting.
You're
Let's
completely
say,
missing the point.
spoiler, let's say Harry ended up with Hermione
Yeah.
in the movies. Just think about how weird
Yeah.
and how much it wouldn't really be Harry Potter at that point, because
Yeah.
so much of the through story is that three-person friendship develops and then changes into a romance but Harry, it never gets like a, whatever. So it's like, it's just, think about how much it would change. So I think the heart of the story has to stay the same, and the pacing and, that's where you have to adapt it for the screen, I think. But I don't know. I've been thinking about since you sent the outline, it was reminding me of playing with Matt Bosler, and we keep telling him, Lewis did this for 8 beats right here, and he went to closed hi-hat, and the fill at the end of everything is a rolling tom fill, but we don't need it to be the same part. It needs to feel the same, though. And so I've just been thinking, when you sent the outline, I was like, I feel like that's kind of a way to describe it. It's, you don't have to do the exact same things as the book, but it has to feel the same, I think. But the hard thing is, it's when you're reading it, you have one thing in your mind, and Pate could have completely different in his mind.
Right.
So it's so hard when it's happening in our heads. You know? So
yeah, that's the thing
that's
that
a
makes
really
this
long answer, but I
so
think
subjective.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good answer. So
what about you?
I would agree with both of you in some respects. I think you gotta figure out what needs to change. I think that's the biggest thing, is what needs to change.
Because we can all agree that some changes have to be made.
Have to happen.
Yeah.
Just because you're changing mediums from something that is entirely in a reader's imagination into something created, filmed, performed, like there's so many other factors going into a film or a TV show. Stuff has to change. And also the structure of filmic storytelling is different. Like
Zach, I'm
screenplay
texting you right
structure.
Keep going. Sorry.
You can keep whispering as I go.
I'm texting Zach right now.
Okay, cool.
Keep whispering.
Screenplay structure is inherently different. Like a script for a movie or a television show has to kind of fit into a 3-act structure, and books don't have to do that. Many books don't.
Yeah.
But they kind of have to be forced into this other structure to really work effectively. Now, there's examples where a movie is adapted or a book is adapted and it's not in that structure and it works.
Yeah.
We'll leave that for our Green Knight review. But I think capturing the core of the story, like the main points of the story, like what the themes are, what the message is, so to speak,
Right. Yeah.
what the characters' motivations are, like you said, those things need to be the same. Otherwise, you might as well be making something different.
Right.
You know, one I forgot to include on the list, so I'll just talk about it here. Annihilation, the movie with Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
So I saw that movie. I thought it was fine.
There's a really good male lead in it too, but Oscar Isaac.
Yeah.
He's in it for like 2 seconds.
Right.
I was like, no. Yeah.
It's very sexist of you to just call it the male lead. You know.
Well, you already said Natalie Portman.
I know. I'm kidding.
Oh no, YouTube, please don't cancel us.
Well, at the time, Annihilation was like hyped up as this feminine power thing because the majority of the cast was women.
Oh.
So I was just making a joke about that.
Directed by a woman, I believe, as well. Let me see.
Nope. Directed by... Oh, but... If you hadn't asked me...
I didn't ask you yet.
That's true, you didn't ask me.
Who is it directed
Alex... Okay. Alex. He also did Ex Machina.
Dreyfus.
Alex Garland. Watch me be right.
The resident
Because
fact
I'm
checker.
definitely right.
I don't know how to spell it.
You don't know how to spell Alex Garland or Annihilation?
Let's go. Let's do Alex Garland. You can keep going. You don't have to wait for me.
I want to revel in me being correct.
He directed it.
Yeah. Anyways, so I saw that movie. I thought it was fine. But then I went and read the book. And it's barely the same. Like, essentially the main concept of a woman going into this, like, area that's got weird sci-fi stuff happening in it. That's about it. And while I was reading it, I was like, why say you're adapting this if that's what you're going to do?
Yeah.
Just make something else. Otherwise, you're just kind of stealing a little idea
Yeah.
and making your own story.
Yeah.
Excuse
good one.
me.
YouTube exclusive.
That was Taco Bell.
T-Bell. Yeah. But Annihilation came to mind thinking of that. It's like, at least tackle the actual story of the material that you're, doing.
Yeah.
In some cases. In other cases, it's like when you find something more archaic or really old that is just like there's nuggets of a good story in there, but the story itself is not like Annihilation is a recent novel that people are big fans of, whereas something like Oil by Upton Sinclair is what Paul Thomas Anderson technically adapted into There Will Be Blood.
Or like Greek tragedies,
Yeah. So there's like elements of those things in there that you might take from, but it's not really an adaptation because no one wants to see an adaptation of that because it's not really that kind of a story. But yeah, I think capturing the core and the heart, like you said, of the story is huge. And it's hard because like some things you want to be really accurate to the story because the story works really, really well. So you don't want to deviate too far from it because it's really good. Other times stories just call for it. That's why I put on here, does the source material change how accurate the adaptation should be? I would say, yeah. Like, I don't think Oil needs to be super accurate, but Lord of the Rings is super beloved, so that might need to be somewhat close,
But it really wasn't.
That's true. It captured, but, well, we'll get into that here in a second.
I would
Especially-
say, I think, oh, sorry, go
no,
ahead.
you go ahead.
But
You can.
I'll go right
go
after.
ahead
Okay.
first, and I'll talk after you.
Okay, you go first.
Right. If I talk first, then you can talk after me. But I'm only going to start after you start talking.
Okay. So you first, and then me.
Yes,
And
I will
then-
talk. I'm talking first right
Okay.
now, but so you talk second
Sure.
after I stop talking
This
right
is
now.
the exclusive YouTube content.
You don't know who it is, though, right? Who? So, just
Somebody talk.
It's already too late. I already forgot what I was going to say.
I did too. I actually did too. So, Wes, go ahead and
What
take
were
it
you
back.
talking about?
Go ahead and take it back.
I was.
We
talk-
ran into each other like on an
I
intersection.
was talking about source material differing, like depending on the source material, it doesn't have to be accurate.
Exactly. So basically, especially if you take into account the minute per screen time,
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, Lord of the Rings, 570 pages. Even if you cut that in half, right? It's like, okay, 260 minutes. It's like, holy crap.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of that is exposition and
Yeah.
describing what's happening, whereas you don't have to if you can see it. But, you know, especially if there's a lot of dialogue or, you know, action or whatever. So, yeah, it's like there obviously has to be there's a time constraint.
Yeah.
You
I
can't
would
just
say-
pick a movie up whenever I have 10 minutes at the doctor's office. I have a movie in my pocket. I'm going to ship it. It's like, no, that's not how people watch movies,
Right.
you know, or shows. I guess it could be.
I would say the other side of the
Shouldn't. Yeah.
the other side of the argument against, something being super beloved, that's a novel or a written work.
Well, that's just what I was saying is before you talk first. This is what I was waiting for.
Okay. The problem is, once I have the idea, I can't. Once I stop, I lose it again.
Dang it.
So go ahead, Wes.
Dang it.
Did you really lose it again?
No.
YouTube exclusive.
Something that is super beloved like that, I think, again, people going into a movie like that, their brain tells them they want to see something exact to what they've imagined. We already decided, and that's what everyone knows, it's never going to be exactly what you imagined. It's not possible. So if it's already not possible, I think the movies that people take home and they're like, that was amazing. I don't think it can live up to word for word something that you hold dear and you've read a million times.
Right.
So if it's not possible to do that anyway, I think it just needs to live on its own. And I had another point. I lost it.
Okay.
Do you guys want to throw me off? Just, you know what to do now.
Have Jake pretend to stop talking
Yeah.
or start talking.
Or Pate talk first next
Yeah.
time.
Is there anything in an adaptation that you feel like is universally a bad idea? Like, that makes it not good? The one that comes to mind for me a lot of times is when characters are combined. Like, it can work sometimes, but I think, I don't know, because then you're just creating a different character that's this weird hodgepodge of already existing characters. And then the thing I was thinking about last night is when an adaptation takes the exposition from a novel or the internal dialogue of a character and just slaps it into voiceover, I think is not good writing. I think it's lazy. Obviously, the way to get around that is way harder. You got to figure out how to externalize someone's internal thoughts, but just making it a VO,
That's voiceover to the layman.
yes. No, I've lost what I was, because
Oh, no.
yeah, voiceover. Sorry.
Dude, one more
He's
time
back.
and you're out.
He's back.
Voiceover, I think, is lazy sometimes. A lot of times, it's an easy way to get across information without having to do anything.
You're both looking at me, which is interesting. No, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it's a good way. It's a way to expand on what you said. It's a way to get lines from a book that people have read into the movie.
They said the line, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is cheap, I think, for the most part. It depends on the source material. If it's a movie that has a lot of internalization, that's like that has a lot of not out loud dialogue, but it's internal dialogue. I think that lends itself to voiceover, because it's matching up with at least the feeling of the book. It's not dialogue. It is, psychological more.
Yeah.
I'll come up with a few of my own. Let me
The
think.
the thing that my brain immediately jumps to is thinking you have to it's hard to describe. Replicate exactly pivotal scenes in this big, like, grandiose way. And what I mean by that is, like, a lot of Ender's Game is like the war games, and they're in this, and they're already written. Null gravity, he changes, spoiler, the paradigm, and, treats forward as down, and, like, there's already some crazy stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And just the idea that if you can't make those scenes compelling, that's like a huge part of his, like, ascent, then you need to figure out something else. Like, don't over CGI this war game scene. Like, make it genuine, because those big moments are like what people latch onto.
Yeah.
And it's like, because there's only a handful of, let's say I read Ender's Game in college, and it's the last time I've read it. And for me, 12 years ago, not really, but it's like, I haven't read it for 12 years, and the movie's coming out now. They better do these 2 scenes that I remember perfect. And it was like, if you make those terrible, just like bad movie scenes in general, that's all I'm going to, because it's like, I remember the shower scene, and I remember that first War Games when he's chief of the salamanders, or whatever. And it's like, boom, those are the 2 things I'm freaking psyched. I don't give a crap if Harrison Ford does terrible. I don't give a crap if Asa does terrible. I'm ready for these scenes. And then they're like, doesn't even look good. No one wants to be there. It's just like, that's all I'm going to remember, because that's all I remember from the book.
Yeah, and also overhyping the scenes in the sense of, like, when the movie feels like it knows this is the big scene.
Yeah.
Then you're like, are you telling me this is a big scene, or is it just a big scene?
Yeah.
And I'm feeling like that.
So anyway,
is that kind of what you're?
I don't really know how to describe it, but it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's so strange, because it's something that exists already, and so just the fact that we're having a discussion about making it again to satisfy this other part of our wanting is already strange, right? It's like, it exists. You love it. You can read it again.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
that was going to be my other point. Thank you.
See?
You brought it back.
Yep. You create problems to fix them.
That's right.
And then you're the hero.
Oh.
Here it is. No, not you.
Jeez.
Me and Jake.
We can just buy new ones.
Check for cracks. Okay.
And you can too at thispodcast.isnotforyou.com.
I wonder what would happen when you type that in.
Did you forget?
Did you
No.
forget? Okay.
So, jumping off of that point, it's exactly what I'm talking about if you go in trying to make an exact replica, the difference between that and just going home and reading it is nothing. So why would you want to watch something, just an example of someone else's lesser imagination than yours,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
you,
Right.
come up with some visualization of the exact book that you can go home and read and have
Right.
read and loved. So it's like if a screenwriter comes out with a screenplay and publishes it 10 years before they make the movie, and everyone loves the screenplay. It's like your scrutiny is going to be so severe from fans that it's just like you can't win at that point.
Yeah.
I think you have to make changes, at least visually. It's like what we talked about with, again, how to make Ender's Game, not what was wrong with it, all that kind of stuff. How it would have been correct is like do something very off the cuff, like off, visually, or it's sound, or it's, if it's done in some
Genre.
creative different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been
Make
a
a film
thriller of
that's
some
very,
kind,
like,
or it could have been
cerebral or something.
So I don't know.
Okay, well, let's talk about some examples, and then we can kind of elaborate further on some of those ideas. But some of the ones I have, I'll just kind of like go through my list really quick, and then we can maybe talk about some specific ones. I'm sure we'll want to talk about Lord of the Rings a little bit more, but Lord of the Rings series I have on here. There Will Be Blood, like I said earlier, is an adaptation of Oil. By Upton Sinclair.
Salvatore.
Oh, okay. Upton Salvatore. The Godfather, Blade Runner, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, The Social Network, and then this one is from my wife. She's a huge fan of the series.
This podcast is not for you. Thank you so much, Steph, for listening.
Yes, she's she's a huge fan of
This podcast is not for you.
Series of Unfortunate Events, and she made a point to say that the series that came out on Netflix is really faithful to the books in terms of just translating them really well.
Yep.
And she was like, the movie with Jim Carrey is horrible. Doesn't capture it at all. So she wanted me to add that onto this list. But I put on Tinker Tailor because that's one where I felt like the book was fine. It's kind of dry, but the movie was better and took what can be very like bland, dour British kind of stuff and made it more tense, added a little bit more action into it. It's less people sitting in rooms looking at papers, which is what Tinker Tailor, the book, is a lot of. Blade Runner is a short story by Philip K. Dick, but it's very different and
I've not read it yet.
Really branched out. It really took the world of that book and did something different in it. The Godfather was partially adapted by the guy that wrote the book, Mario Puzo. And then The Social Network is based on a book that is a fictionalized account of the founding of Facebook. And I put it on here because it's... What?
Accidental Billionaires.
That is the name of the book?
Yeah.
That's your little pose for...
Oops. $500 million.
You slipped on something.
Whoa! I guess I have 1,000 million.
A billion.
A 1,000 million. Which, as we all know, is a billion.
But
gosh, dang it! That would have been so funny if they're upset. Dang it! This was an accident.
It happened again.
But I put Social Network on here because I thought the adaptation of that book was really well done. Regardless of whether or not the book is accurate to the actual events, it was specific. It was a specific adaptation of that book because that book had a specific account.
Is it different than Lincoln?
How is it different than Lincoln?
Yeah.
Because as far as I know, that's the only book about the founding of Facebook. It's not like there's 50 books about the founding of Facebook like there is about Abraham Lincoln. And also, the way that book is written, it's not a...
I've read it.
I know. I'm just elaborating for the... We're doing a podcast right now, and there's people listening.
Yeah, but you're looking at me.
I know. You're in the...
Accidental Billionaires.
Oops. But the way that book is written, it reads more like a novel than it does a historical adaptation of events. So that's why I included it on here.
It's borderline.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll think about it, and then we'll get back to you.
And then the big one is Lord of the Rings, obviously. That's a lot of people will point to that as some of the best adaptations there are.
Yes. We want to talk about yours first?
Sure.
I mean, obviously, Lord of the Rings is...
There's going to be some crossover.
Yeah, I mean, it would be on my list, too. Probably the best example, I would say. Just because, again, they made the right changes. They made the right amount of changes.
Mm-hmm. It captured the core of it.
It did, but it feels different. And that's what's even crazier is the books feel much different than the movies. The movies are a lot darker. They're a lot... Now, the second two books, and especially the last book, are darker. Mm-hmm. But the way Tolkien writes, it just doesn't... It's not the same as the way Pete tells a story. Mm-hmm. So, I think it even feels
That's
different,
Peter
but it's
Jackson, the
still,
director, by the way.
but it's still amazing
Yeah.
in its own right, and they stand on their own. That's the big difference between those movies and a lot of
You can
adaptations.
enjoy those without having read the books.
Correct. And I not that you can't do that with other stuff,
Sure.
but I think they're both some of the best works of art in their respective categories, and they're the same story, but they're very different. I think.
Right. Yeah, sometimes a sign of a bad adaptation that's just playing to fans of the source material is if you're unfamiliar, you're watching it, you're like, what? What is going on?
Yes.
I don't understand.
They assume everyone's in on the joke,
Right.
or in on the
And there's
scene.
there's extended stuff in the Lord of the Rings that is that way, I think. That is specifically in the movies. I think there's a couple scenes where you're like, huh? What does this have to do with anything? And it's something from the book that they felt like needed to be cut out. But yeah. I would agree with you. I think it's one of the best books to movie adaptations just because it excelled within the world of film regardless of the source material. It was technically incredible. The stuff that they pulled off with that movie, visual effects wise, performance wise, scale of the movie, it like put New Zealand's filmmaking on the map more. But yeah, that would probably be very close to the top of my list of best adaptations of all time.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I had something, but I lost it. I'm terrible at this now.
I didn't even say anything.
Go ahead. I know you didn't. It wasn't your fault.
I have nothing else to add.
Okay.
I agree. They're good. I've only read 2 of the books, so I can't really speak to 2 or 3. But I've read The Hobbit and Fellowship.
Oh, we'll talk about The Hobbit.
I have it.
See?
It's Jake. He's bringing me back. As I am Wes, as we all know.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost it. Go ahead and say what you just said.
Are you serious right now?
Say it. Wait.
See?
No, I mean before that.
I lost it.
He's only read The Hobbit and Fellowship.
Yeah, but he has to say it, I think.
So I can't. Again, I've only read 2, so I can't speak to 2 or 3. But I have read.
I got it.
Are you serious?
This is 100% real.
Wow.
Okay.
Because he said it the exact same way.
I'm back.
That was great.
Hurry up and say it.
People, this is a train
No,
of
just
thought.
say it. Just say it.
Oh, no.
I have it.
Again.
No.
For what we're talking about in terms of them being different, if you don't know or
And I
you
lost it.
don't... You lost what you're going to say.
Yeah.
People don't know that we're working off of a script, and it all depends on what we're all saying.
I'm going to have you say what you just said again so I know what to do.
Fine.
Okay.
Hey, again,
So-
it's because... Oh, yes.
Oh, that's good. Okay. There's evidence for them being very different in the appendices or the making of documentary of Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of... it shows you how different the books are from the films.
And the thought process behind the changes they made.
Yeah. And I think that gives you quite a good picture of, or at least evidence for the way to deviate in adaptation and the best way to do it. But
And you also know, like, with someone like Peter Jackson, who is an avid fan of those books, he's not just gonna like. Yeah, I don't really
that's
know
the
anything
thing.
about these.
The ultimate appreciation for something is like, I don't actually want to do that same thing.
Yeah.
It's like covering a song. The best way to cover a song is to do your own thing with it.
Right.
Because you're just ripping off the original artist if you're doing it the way they did.
Yeah.
You think that you can do it similar to them.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying with playing it.
Yeah.
So I think the best way to honor somebody's art or to, work on an adaptation of somebody's art that you really appreciate is to do something original with it.
Yeah.
and pay respect to it.
Yeah.
And just to cap off Lord of the Rings, I feel like, though, with those adaptations, he stayed faithful in terms of what Lord of the Rings is about. Like, the themes in the books are present in the movies.
Yes.
And the characters are, at their core, the same characters in a lot of ways. And, and the journey that the characters go through is the same.
Right.
But
cosmetic changes were made and aging was changed and, you know, things that don't really matter for...
Narrative structure changed a little bit, yeah.
But anyway.
Jake, what did you have on your list of best here?
Really the only addition I had that would not have been crossover was Arrival. The Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner movie.
By Denis.
Directed by Denis. Who's batting almost 1,000% in terms of his movies.
He's quite the force to be reckoned with in terms of filmmaking.
I love that, and we'll talk a little bit about it, but, you know, that's part of why this
Now, you've read it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
This right here is why Dune is more exciting for me, because I've seen what he can do with a piece of written work in relation to the film. So now Arrival is based on a short story called Story of Your Life. And I think it's probably, I guess it depends on the book size, but I think my book, you know, about this normal size book, I think it's like 30 or 40 pages. So it's absolutely
It's a
not
short
Dune.
story then.
Yeah. So it's absolutely not Dune. But now this is interesting, and I was wondering if we wanted to talk a little bit more about this topic, and I was just going to bring it up now. But I watched it first, and then I read it. So how much does that change the way that, you know, because the book is, I mean, you've seen Arrival. It's like, I mean, the concepts are just like high. And that's what it's dealing with, not where do the aliens come from? Why are they here? You know, it's
which is more interesting for
Yes.
sure, because every movie's done that thing.
And so the short story is like, I don't think I would have been able to understand the short story without a frame of reference. You know, it's
Is
like,
it that abstract of a story?
it's just, I mean, the concepts are higher. It's not just because, you know, in the movie, the aliens are, they don't have a spoken language, an audible, or, you know, so it's just symbols, but that communicate deeper thoughts and deeper feelings, and the way that you draw them matters. And so it's like, it's that, but cranked. It's like there's another level to the communication that happens. The human interaction with the aliens is more extensive. And so I don't think I would have been able to follow at all. And so it was just interesting.
Well, short stories a lot of times can be really, really abstract and very ambiguous.
Yeah.
A lot of short stories I've read are that way, and I'm not sure why. I think it's maybe to like garner interest and
Try to make a novel out of it.
I'd say
Possibly.
some short stories do get novelized after gaining popularity or whatever. But anyway, yeah, it was the movie's great. I think it's a really good piece of artwork. And then I read the short story, and then I went back and watched the movie again, and I was like, I don't think you could have done to the extent that the short story did.
Yeah.
I think this is great. This is
right.
You know, people, I mean, what are the percentage of the people that are going to read the short story anyway?
Right.
So it's like, this is good enough.
I did that in the same order with Annihilation. I read Annihilation after seeing the movie because I was very intrigued by the concept of the world, and I also knew there was 2 other books in that series, which I have not gotten to yet. I've only read the first 2. I think it's called X or something, the series is. But yeah, it was interesting. After watching the movie and then reading that book, it was a different perspective coming to the source material afterwards.
Yeah.
Which I think that's the only time I've done that, really. But it's obviously different than Arrival being a short story.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an interesting Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that would impact the perception of a adaptation.
Imagine someone like, I don't know, like look at the best. It's like imagine someone reading, I don't know,
The Godfather.
the Deathly Hollows
Mm-hmm.
after watching the movie. You know?
Yeah.
It's just like, gee whiz,
Yeah.
how much better it is, you know? And that's even, I think part 2 is a pretty good movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, imagine just like, if you love that, dude, I got something to show you. You know, it's like, but
Yeah.
the problem is people are going to be like, I don't read. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've
Yeah.
done an episode about that before. But
Pate, what do you got as your best?
In addition to yours, I have to mention the Sunset Limited because
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite.
you read
Dude,
that?
also, we need. I didn't
Crazy.
stipulate this at the
Didn't take that
beginning.
long. I mean, it's
This is stuff that we have both read, the source material and seen. There's obviously other adaptations, but that's why these lists are limited. It's like what we know both of,
Yeah.
because we
Yes.
can't comment on the adaptation of whatever if we
Right.
haven't seen the book or read the
Whatever.
book.
Yeah.
it's almost exactly the same. It's a stage play.
Yeah,
The Sunset Limited is a stage play, so it's already in.
you can do it.
It's
almost
already in
directly.
screenplay form, essentially.
Yeah.
But I do love what they did. It's a Cormac McCarthy stage play. I also have No Country on here. I haven't read all of No Country for Old Men yet. About halfway through it, so I didn't know if it
It's the
counted.
same
But
writer, right?
Cormac McCarthy. So two of his.
He's
I thought
a
were
very
very-
good author.
But I love the way that they shot Sunset Limited, and I thought
Yep.
that they got the right performances from the right people. I think that it just was as perfect as you can do. I think
I love when
of that
Samuel's
adaptation.
like, get these snakes off this plane.
It's a great
Yeah.
part of that scene
Yes.
Yes.
where they're
Of this
debating,
train, really,
they're-
is what he says.
and then they start debating the existence of God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one I had was Memento. I have read the short story
Oh,
that Jonathan Nolan wrote in 2001. And I thought that adaptation, it's only like 10 pages. Like, it's really short. And obviously Chris Nolan did something way beyond,
classic Chris.
what that short story is. But the Memento is kind of how would you describe Memento? A time-bending thinker
about
that's
memory.
about memory. That is it's in nut form in the short story, but it is Memento is about how the movie's shot. I mean, that's what the movie is
Yeah.
really about, is how it was made.
I mean,
So I
that
think
movie
that,
can only work
again-
as a movie. Like,
Right.
the-
And that's what I think makes it a success in terms of adaptation is it really became a film. And
the
you
thing,
can't.
because the thing about that movie, if you were to try and take that movie and put it on the page, you wouldn't be able to communicate the twist
Correct.
of the movie
Because
you would
you're
have to
using
say
color,
when things are
you're using-
happening. Whereas in the movie, it's ambiguous, and then you figure it out as it goes.
Yeah.
But
And so here's one. How the Grinch Stole Christmas. The Ron Howard directed
about that one.
version. I think it's probably the best. I just don't see how anybody could have done better than that
yeah,
in terms of making it a live action movie.
right. Because you can look at the bad example of that with Cat in the Hat.
Yeah, I was thinking of Cat in the Hat when you mentioned Series of Unfortunate Events, the movie, because it's almost that stupid.
Yeah,
Like, and the Grinch isn't stupid really. It's fantastical and it's silly, but it's not stupid.
right. And so much of that movie rides on Carrie's performance.
For sure.
He's
Yeah.
really good.
For sure.
Like, it's weird to say, like, his performance as the Grinch was really good, but it
It
was.
is, yeah. I think that would be a good adaptation.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a lot of room. Obviously, it's like 20 words on a page in
Yeah.
Dr. Seuss's versions, and it's all rhyming.
Mm-hmm.
But that's added in really well. Is it Attenborough. I think it's David Attenborough that does the voiceover, or maybe it's
I don't remember who does the voiceover.
Morgan
But-
Freeman.
every once in a while, every few scenes, there's a voiceover with Dr. Seuss's rhyming
Yeah,
words, you know, and I think that was artfully done too.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are, I think, are some other good examples.
The other one you mentioned beforehand, Steph mentioned it last night when we were talking about this idea, is Passion of the Christ, which
We just didn't want to talk about it because it's true.
right?
So it's a historical.
that's also true.
So it kind of,
Kind of a Social Network situation.
yeah.
You know, Social Network, the Bible, they're very similar.
The Bible's not the movie. The
Accidental
Passion of the
Savior.
Christ.
Oh, dang it.
Accidental Savior.
Whoops.
Whoops, I saved everybody else and made $1 billion.
I didn't mean to. That's what I've got for good ones. I have a couple other ones, but I haven't read Jurassic Park.
Yeah, there was
So-
other ones like Schindler's List.
Fight Club, I
was
have
on
read.
there.
Sorry, I have one more. Fight
Oh,
Club.
okay.
It's the only
Dude,
Chuck
dude.
Palahniuk book I've read. Fight Club. We don't talk about it. Oh, sorry. Sorry, guys.
The episode's just going to cut to black right there.
I feel like David Fincher, his style was really good for that book
Mm-hmm.
and adapting it.
He's a very nihilistic kind of filmmaker, and it's a very nihilistic source material.
So I felt like that fit really well. And then obviously it lives on its own. There's
Yeah.
a million people, billions of people probably now that have seen Fight Club and haven't read it. You know?
Yeah.
So
Let's talk about some bad ones real quick.
okay.
We had a whole episode about Ender's Game. Ender's Game, bad adaptation.
Yeah.
Goblet of Fire, to me, is the absolute worst movie adaptation
It's
of...
probably my favorite book in the series too.
It's a
which
great book.
Definitely up
shame.
there. Yeah.
And the reason it's bad is, or a reason it's bad, they cram like 20 chapters
Yeah.
into the first 20 minutes of the movie, and it just doesn't work.
And
And
that's
also
a thick
just
boy too. Like
Yeah.
even after it was the longest one until Deathly Hollows came
Yeah.
out, right?
yeah, it also just looks bad. Like the Quidditch World Cup at the beginning just looks bad. Looks like a CGI
Just
thing.
like a really cool thing
Yeah.
that happens in the book, and
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if Harry Potter would have been better as a series, like a HBO series.
yeah.
My we had, who was I talking to
I don't
about
remember
this?
who.
Oh,
Oh,
my buddy Kevin always had the idea of doing an animated series of the Harry Potter books, obviously post movies, because he's like, why do the movies again in
Yeah.
movie form? But doing them animated in series form, he was like, you could be really faithful to those books doing that and do some really cool
I mean,
animation
that's a
stuff.
Game of Thrones type run. Like you could
Yeah.
you could run that
Oh.
for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And then you don't have to worry about actors
Yeah.
aging or anything like that. But, anyways, yeah,
The Hobbit.
that's the worst.
The
one.
Hobbit.
The Hobbit,
Obviously a masterpiece.
the book.
The movie.
I think this is one of the best examples of the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
which is so interesting because the same filmmaker
yeah.
has the Lord of the Rings trilogy on here on our best list, and part of it was I know Jackson didn't want to do it for a long time, was kind of thrown into it.
Yeah.
You just don't need to make 3 movies out of a 200-page book.
Yeah. I mean, it would easily be the shortest if it were part of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. So, and jumping on a 3D trend at the same time as high frame rate, which died very quickly.
Yeah.
I just think they completely cut out what made the Lord of the Rings so attractive to people. It's things that people don't necessarily clock when they're watching it is real people on the screen, you know, practical effects.
All of
and-
the orcs in The Hobbit were CG'd.
Yeah.
As opposed to people in costumes in the
Everyone's-
original one.
it's too polished looking.
Yep.
It just doesn't look the same as Lord of the Rings.
Mhm.
Maybe it shouldn't. maybe it should, because it takes place earlier, it should look a little more polished, but it
Yeah.
doesn't work.
It also just like made the story more convoluted than it needed to be. Like the story of the
Yeah.
Hobbit is very simple,
Sure.
and it just stuffed things into it that didn't need to be
From
there.
different books and stuff. Yeah.
And
It's a nightmare.
tried to tie it to Lord of the Rings, which I don't think you needed to do.
Yeah, I agree.
The best scene in the movie was him interacting with Gollum, and that's pretty much as it was in the book.
Yeah.
And that's all you really needed to tie into Lord of the Rings. Like, just make one movie about The Hobbit. Anyways, Jake, do you have anything you want to say about The Hobbit?
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Any of them.
You're lucky, dude.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's true. I put The Dark Tower on here. I really enjoy this series, but this in no way should ever be attempted in feature films. Like, it's a 7-book series that is so bizarre in terms of concept that
I saw this on quite a few lists.
it's
when I was looking
really
at stuff.
bad. Like, really, really bad. I don't even feel like it remotely captures what the Dark Tower series even feels like. And it's too hard to even describe what the Dark Tower is about. It's very good, very unique, but
They're doing movies. I thought that they did series.
the original
It's a
plan,
movie, right?
yes, this is a movie with Idris Elba.
I saw it, but I haven't read it. I mean,
Right. So the original plan, I think, was to make a movie and then a connective series and then back to movie, and it was going to like bounce back and forth, and it's just a convoluted mess of an idea. This could only work in series form, and even then I don't know that it could, because it gets so meta that I think any series like this would just like disappear inside of its own butt in terms of pretentiousness and weirdness. And
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to greenlight anything Stephen King writes. So
yeah,
Just expect
though
it at
after
this
the
point.
failure of that movie, I don't know if it's
Come on.
moving forward or not. The series might
Oh.
still be happening, or a series version might still be happening.
Pet Cemetery, dude.
Greenlight it. Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe. This has been adapted a few times. Most recently by Disney?
I think it's Disney. Yeah.
Very meh adaptations, I think. Like, this is another one where I don't feel like the series, all of the adaptations try and be really faithful to these books, and in theme and concept I think you need to be, but otherwise, but you need to branch out. You need to Lord of
Yeah.
the Rings it
Right.
a little bit more, and
Mm-hmm.
all of the movies of Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe feel really kiddie,
Yes.
and I don't know why, because when you read the Chronicles of Narnia series, they don't feel that way. They don't feel like
Yeah.
I'm being talked down to like I'm 12.
Right.
You know what I mean? The characters are kids.
Yeah. It
But-
deals with like children kings.
Yes.
And like that kind of feel of
It has that medieval fantasy kind of stuff tied into it, but the movies are so toothless.
Yeah.
And bleh.
Yep.
And then I included Game of Thrones because I wanted to mention like there were good adaptations to a point, and then they decided to continue the series past where the novels were completed.
Yeah.
And just like ended on their own, sort of. And I think pretty much universally from what I read online, the ending they botched. And if social media is to be believed, the Game of Thrones ending everybody hates. But the first few seasons were pretty good adaptations of those books, pretty faithful to them. And so there's good things and bad things about the Game of Thrones series in general. But I just mean in terms of quality of the adaptation. But
As a studio, as a HBO, why would you embark on something like that without an ending yet? You know?
maybe they bought into
I mean,
the
they
idea
made
that-
money, no doubt. But I just mean,
Maybe they bought into the idea that Martin was going to try and have him done by the time the show got caught up to him.
right.
which they never should have believed because he's been writing that series for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And he's been writing this book in particular in the series for like
10.
10.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jake, you got a couple on here.
We're at 56 minutes.
Okay.
What do you want to do?
We'll just finish these couple up and any Peyton wants to talk about.
How
and then,
many worsts?
I don't know that we need to do upcoming ones.
Yeah.
I think it's
we do.
worth. Huh?
How many worsts do you have?
I think I only have three.
Yes, I have 2 on the bad adaptations. I put Fahrenheit 451, which was an HBO.
Michael B. Jordan.
Yes.
Okay.
HBO Michael B. Jordan thing. I don't know. It's just weird.
Was it a movie or was it a
I think
series?
it's like a 2 or 3 part series. I think.
Oh, weird.
I don't remember it being a movie. I remember it being a show, and I watched it once with Christian and Logan, and I don't. But I don't. I think it's
because Christian's
2
a big Ray Bradbury fan, right?
Yeah, and we our book club is called the 451 Club. Like that's the first book we read. That's like a very, and I think it's really good. It's almost always timely, and the show thing was like, it's weird when you're futuristic, but it doesn't feel futuristic like the book felt futuristic. It's so strange. It's like, I don't know. So it never felt right. And I don't think Montag had the same motivations as he does in the book, which, is kind of a big deal. And then my second one is Ready Player One, which
I almost included this on my worsts too.
I really, really, really liked the book. I mean, I think
Oh, interesting.
it's like 250, 260, so it's not super long, but I read it in like a week maybe. And it was one of those things where our book club was like, we text each other and we're like, can we just like meet early? Because everyone kind of sped through it. Yeah, sure. We're all done. That's crazy. It's like we all just like really dug it. And the book was just kind of like, almost felt like Space Jam-y before Space Jam is like, look at all these things. That's cool. And it's like the book felt like it was... Ernest Cline was like weaving these pop culture references in for the sake of story. And it never felt like that in the movie. Really, it was just kind of like, here's the Iron Giant. That's cool, right? Here's, it's just like...
Yeah.
And then, I don't know. Have you guys read it?
I haven't.
I have.
Have you watched the movie?
I have watched the movie.
Just minor spoiler, but it's like, he meets these 3 people in real life, 2 people in real life that he's been working with this whole time. And the book is like, oh, wow, this is crazy. You love living in this world because you're ugly. And then in the movie, she has like pimples or something. You're like, that's not, no. Like,
Yeah.
She's like, I'm just really ugly. And it's like some fine looking 25-year-old with pimples. And it's just like, this
Classic
is not.
movie, like.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of things like that where.
Well, I think Steven Spielberg is the wrong filmmaker for
Yeah.
something like that.
I think
He's too.
The only reason they picked him is because it's like a quote period piece where it's like, remember all these things from the 80s?
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg. It's like, that doesn't mean he's going to be the right person.
Well, and also
to
he
make
probably
it.
didn't actually direct like 90% of that movie because it's
Right.
all computer generated.
CG, yeah.
But yeah, I felt like that needed a younger filmmaker
Yeah.
that understands the love of that stuff,
Yeah.
not the person that made that stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't a huge fan of the book, but you get from the book like the characters love that stuff.
Yeah.
They didn't make that,
Yeah.
so the perspective of the filmmaker needs to be different than that, I
Yeah.
think. But
Those are my only 2 that really jumped out. Besides, Goblet of Fire, Ender's Game, blah, blah, blah. So.
Pate, what you got?
I have Dune. I have the original Dune movie. It is not only one of the worst adaptations, I think it's one of the worst movies ever made.
Really?
It's terrible.
I knew it was
Really?
on there for bad adaptations. I didn't.
Yeah. If you haven't watched it, I think it's worth watching just because of how bad it is. It's just, does not capture anything.
It's so bizarre because it's David Lynch, who people like
Yep.
love David Lynch's films.
Yep.
And he's an acclaimed filmmaker. But it's almost universally hated, even amongst David Lynch fans.
It is it feels cheap.
It
One,
looks cheap.
yeah. And it feels hastily made, and it just doesn't. The tone of Dune is pretty serious.
Yeah.
Like, it's serious the whole time, and you guys have read it now.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't capture that at all.
Yeah.
Like, it's not. It feels like a made-for-TV movie. It's that quality. But the other one I would say, Aragon, I thought was bad. I loved the first Aragon book,
Same.
and I think it was more of the same, like, Disneyfied
Yeah.
kind of junk that is just too Disneyfied, polished garbage, essentially. They didn't have a filmmaker that knew the book really clearly going in, so
They
I
were
don't know
like,
if you
"Here,
guys have
adapt
read
this."
that. You guys read that book? No.
I have. It's been a very long time. I never saw the movie.
Yeah, it's not good. The last one I will say is The Great Gatsby, the Robert Redford film. I think the DiCaprio one, which is made by
Baz Luhrmann.
Baz Luhrmann, is a little bit better just because it's stylized
Yeah.
and it's got something to it.
Yeah. I wasn't going to put it on my best list, but
I think it's
thought
good.
it was- yeah.
I think it's
yeah.
good.
Well
I think
done.
the Robert Redford one in the 80s is not good. And maybe 70s.
Could be 60s.
But again, it's like it's so flat,
Yeah.
and it's again, word for word, scene for scene. The Baz Luhrmann one at least has some like stylistic choices in it.
Yeah.
Music and cutting and lighting and stuff like that.
I almost
so.
included his version of Romeo and Juliet on my best.
It's a good one. Yeah, it's really good.
Because he just adds so much style into
Yep.
it. And Shakespeare is one that we probably could have talked about more. There's
It's been adapted probably the most.
so many times and in such different styles.
Yeah.
The thing I was going to say about Romeo and Juliet in general is
Romeo plus Juliet.
you have to do something different.
Yes.
Because the traditional adaptation has been done like 17 billion times.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm really interested in the upcoming Joel Cohen Macbeth, is because that's been done like so many times.
See, and that's what I don't understand about Cinderella. It just keeps coming out. They just keep making Cinderella.
Is there another Cinderella coming out?
Yes. And it's the same every time. And it's just, you've got to do something different, you know?
Well, and those live action Disney movies are bizarre because they're essentially trying to do a shot for shot remake of the animated movies a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's like, why?
It must be safe. They know they can hit their quota, but
Yeah.
I just don't, In
Anyways.
terms of art, it doesn't make sense.
Well, real quick, we can go through just like, hey, these are some upcoming adaptations that we've read and
You
are.
want to make it very brief.
Yeah. So ones that you have read, Dune, that's upcoming. Well, we've also read that. Death on the Nile, the Agatha Christie one. Killers of the Flower Moon, which is an upcoming Scorsese movie,
Yes.
right? And then the Wheel of Time series is being adapted into a Amazon Prime series.
Yes.
And then one that I have read is that Joel Cohen Macbeth with Denzel Washington as Macbeth.
Macbeth.
But yeah, that's what's coming up
On
in
the
terms
horizon.
of adaptations. There's a lot of very obscure adaptations being made.
Yeah.
I was just looking at upcoming. I don't have anything.
So let us know what you think about adaptations. What are some good ones? What are some bad ones? What makes a good one? Does it need to be faithful? Does it not? My name is Wes, and this has been This Podcast Is
My
Not
name
For
is
You.
also Wes,
My
and
name
this
is
has
Jake.
been This Podcast Is Not For You.
Subscribe to our YouTube.
Peace out.